Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Tuesday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and last night pretty much exemplified what this season has been like in a nutshell, with the parading dumpster fire that is the New York Mets bullpen. Just completely putting last night's game out of reach. I want to talk a little bit about what happened, who was responsible, and what the hell the Mets are going to do to fix this, because if they don't, they're in deep trouble for the rest of this season. It's an appropriately gloomy day today after last night's 12-3 loss to the Atlanta Braves. I don't often shut games off, but last night proved to be an exception to that rule. I had to shut the game off. I could not watch the ninth inning after Familia and Gagno combined to completely open the floodgates and kick the door off the hinges for the Mets. They followed a lackluster performance from Zach Wheeler, but still, I mean, it was 5-3 when Mickey Callaway turned to the bullpen, and I'll get to Mickey Callaway in a minute, but you know, at 5-3, the game's within reach. 12-3, not so much. 7-3, not so much. 9-3, not so much. The Mets bullpen is, without question, for yet another, again, just seems like we're repeating ourselves, it is by far and away the Achilles heel of this team. And, I mean, Justin Wilson should be back soon, so that's great. Maybe he can pitch in some of these higher leverage situations. But, you know, Jerry's Familia is public enemy number one in that bullpen. He, after last night's abysmal performance, earns his 9th GOAT award of the season from me. That leads the team. And, I mean, I feel like every time that piece of shit walks into... Sorry. I feel like every time Familia walks into a ball game, no matter what the score is, the Mets are going to lose. And that's not what you want. Those aren't the feels that you want to feel when your setup man, who you signed to a 3-year, $30 million contract, comes out of the bullpen. It's the worst possible feeling ever. And I cannot imagine, I said this like a week ago, imagine being a position player on this team, basically doing your job. Now, last night was a bit of an exception because they did kick the ball around the infield quite a bit in the early goings of the game. They did not play crisp defense behind Zach Wheeler. But imagine being these guys who are doing their best to score runs. And look, 3 runs, not enough, obviously, but it could be enough if you had a pitching staff that could freaking get a guy out without giving up a home run and walking the ballpark. Walks are the most inexcusable part to me. Walks are just nails on a chalkboard to me. Throw strikes. You know, imagine being one of these position players. Sorry, I'm a little bit tangential this morning. But imagine being one of these guys and being like, here comes the bullpen. It's over. It's over again. And I love the way that Pete Alonso handled the media last week when he said, cut the crap. Edwin Diaz is our closer. I'll go to war with him every day. He's saying and doing all the right things. But, you know, underneath the facade, these guys have to be thinking, man, can it get any worse than this? Have I ever seen anything worse than this? I'm sure that we all have. But in the moment, it certainly doesn't feel like it. I mean, if you're looking at the way the Nationals bullpen started the season, where they basically put the team at 10 games under 500 by the end of the first month of play, their bullpen was the culprit, the Nationals, that is. And now the Mets, a month and a half later, are doing the same thing to themselves. Or 2 months later, I guess, by now. But now the Mets bullpen is doing everything it can to put the Mets 10 games behind. And they're almost 10 games behind. They're 8.5 games out of first place now. It's the furthest out of first place they've been all season. They're now 5 games under 500. 5 or 4? 5. 34 and 39, I think. Could be wrong on that. But the bullpen, man. The bullpen. Now, here's the thing. What was Mickey Callaway supposed to do last night? That's the question I want to ask. because Mets Twitter, as it normally is, and does, knows better than everybody, and could not help but call Mickey Callaway an idiot for doing what he did last night. And I'm sorry, but when you're giving a player who's being paid over $10 million a year, to get 3 outs out of the bullpen, you should be able to turn to that player and say, here's the ball, buddy, give me 3 outs. How do you blame the manager for that? What should he have done? Should he have brought in Seth Lugo? Should he have brought in Edwin Diaz so that then Mets Twitter tomorrow can freak out and say, well, now Diaz not available. Oh, now Lugo's not available. I just don't understand the criticism of the manager for bringing in a player who's supposed to be in the position he's been brought into, and the player fails, and it's the manager's fault. Is Mickey Callaway a good manager? Hells to the no. I've said that multiple times, but he doesn't deserve the blame for things like Jeurys Familia not remembering how to pitch. That's not on Mickey Callaway. Now, you could argue maybe he should be pitching him in lower leverage situations. Sure, but when the situation presents itself like it did last night, what should Mickey Callaway have done? Robert Gsellman was used yesterday, or 2 days ago, Sunday. You cannot keep pitching the same guys. You have to shift the load around the bullpen, otherwise you kill your good guys. It's what happened to the Mets last year. It's what Mickey's trying to do differently this year. Unfortunately, the results aren't there. That's not on the manager, so stop blaming him. He deserves blame for lots of things, but poor performance from his players is not one of them. So what do the Mets do to fix this? That's the question that I keep asking. And while a lot of Mets Twitter is irrational and insane, there is a good chunk of it that's not. And I had some good chats last night with some folks about what the hell are we going to do? Because when you look down at AAA, there's no depth to dip into. I mean, there's not. How did everybody feel about Hector Santiago's performance on Saturday? Was it good? No, he got DFA'd. They shipped him. So that's the kind of player that the Mets are going to be calling up from AAA. And my point here is we can bitch and complain about holding players accountable and let's DFA Familia, which, by the way, ain't going to happen. And it's not because of the Mets. It's because baseball teams and businesses don't invest $30 million in something across a 3-year period and decide, we don't need that $30 million. We're just going to pay this guy to have him do nothing for us. Now, again, you could argue and say, well, doing nothing for you is better than having him come in and blow games. Okay, but as we've also talked about, and as Mets Twitter's also pointed out numerous times, relief pitchers are fickle. They go up and down. Perhaps this is Familia's down year. Next year will be good. Sort of thing that happens with the Mets. You get rid of a reliever, Anthony Swarzak. Anthony Swarzak's been pretty good this year. So you know, you guys got to just chill and stop reacting to everything. It's crazy, and the knee-jerk reactions to things like, look, Familia's not going anywhere. Deal with it. It is a fact of life. $30 million, 3-year guaranteed contract. He is not being designated for assignment or cut or anything in the first 20%, not even 15% of the life of the contract that you guaranteed him. It just doesn't happen. And it's not because the Wilpons are cheap. It's because that's the way businesses are run. Sorry, folks, that's reality. So let's get down to reality and figure out what the Mets can do to resolve this situation. Here's the bad news. There's next to nothing the Mets can do. That's the really bad news. So the only chance the Mets have at turning this season around before it continues to spiral out of control is for the personnel that is in that bullpen right now to get their proverbial shit together and collectively pull themselves up and figure this shit out, because these are good pitchers. They are talented pitchers. They have played and pitched, for the most part, very poorly for the majority of this season. They have to be better, and if they're not, we can kiss 2019 goodbye. That's reality. Sorry, folks. So the same level of reality that will assure me that Jeurys Familia is not getting cut tells me that these guys in the bullpen have to be better. Don't blame Mickey Callaway. Don't blame Brodie Van Wagenen. Blame the personnel for playing like shit. And that's the bottom line. That was a very positive and encouraging show today. And the best news is the Mets have Jacob deGrom going tonight against perhaps the one of the most dominant anti-Mets pitchers, Julio Teheran, who meanwhile is having a fantastic season, as Gary Cohen has pointed out a few times, very quietly. So here's what I expect for tonight, staying on a positive note. Jacob deGrom will continue to pitch well. He will throw 6 innings. He will give up 2 runs and give way to the bullpen that will allow the Braves to open up a lead in the 7th, 8th, and we won't even get to see Edwin Diaz try to pick himself back up because the Mets will be losing by 8 runs in the 9th inning. Hopefully I'm wrong, but history can only repeat itself so many times before you got to start realizing this is not an aberration, this is reality. And I'm there right now with this bullpen. This bullpen, the reality is they stink, and there's a problem, and it needs to be fixed. And they need to fix it themselves internally. So let's see tomorrow if I'm going to be a little bit happier, if the weather decides to be a little bit nicer, and if the Mets decide to play baseball for 9 innings as opposed to just 7. Until then, thanks for watching. Sorry for being pissy. And as always, let's go Mets.